Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week, our reading is centered around the book of 1 Timothy, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Bream and Zack Unkenholz, and we're in 1 Timothy chapter 5. And he says, "Never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would to your own father. Talk to younger men as you would your own brothers. Treat older women as you would your mother, and treat younger women with all purity as you would your own sisters. Take care of any widow who has no one else to care for her. But if she has grandchildren or grandchildren, their responsibility is to show godliness at home and repay their parents for taking care of them. This is something that pleases God. Now, a true widow, a woman who is truly alone in the world, has placed her hope in God. She prays night and day, asking God for his help. But the widow who lives only for pleasure is spiritually dead, even while she lives. Give these instructions to the church, so that no one will be open to criticism. But those who don't care for their own relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. A widow who is put on the list for support must be a woman who is at least 60 years old and was faithful to her husband. She must be well respected by everyone because of the good she has done. Has she brought up her children well? Has she been kind to strangers and served others humbly? Has she helped those who are in trouble? Has she always been ready to do good? The younger widows should not be on the list because of their physical desires will overpower their devotion to Christ, and they will want to remarry. Then they would be guilty of breaking their previous pledge. And if they are on the list, they will learn to be lazy and will spend their time gossiping from house to house, meddling in other people's business, and talking about things they shouldn't. So I advise those young widows to marry again, have children, and take care of their own homes. Then the enemy will not be able to say anything against them. For I am afraid that some of them have already gone astray and now follow Satan. If a woman who is a believer has relatives who are widows, she must take care of them and not put the responsibility on the church. Then the church can care for the widows who are truly alone." Twofold question. He spends most of his time talking about widows here, but the twofold question is this: should there be certain expectations of the people we help? And is there a limitation on certain kinds of widows?
So I think here it isn't talking about a one-time help or needing assistance in paying a certain bill or something. It is talking about fully supporting. This was the means of social security. Like, they didn't have those type of payments, so this was the welfare system for the older women that were in the church that had no way to support themselves. So I think this isn't meant to be about helping those in need as much as it is about a complete support of the women in this situation where they had nothing and they were a great help to the church. They were the prayer warriors. I mean, they were praying night and day. So if they, were able to support the women would be able to help the church and do things around there. So I think that is what this is talking about. I feel like it's very different from modern day structure and what we do, although being able to care for people is important. I feel like this is a very specific, the widow part is a very specific instance that was needed at that time.
I mean, the passage starts off talking about how we're to respect everyone, regardless of their age or who they are. I mean, saying that we should not speak harshly to older men, people that are our own age or younger. We should talk to them like brothers or sisters. And so it's talking about how do we care for other people well. But it is interesting when it puts these limitations on caring for a specific group of people, widows. But I will say though too is that I think context is important, and I think it's one of the reasons why it goes so deep into this. So I used to think a widow was a woman whose husband died, and a widower was a woman who killed her husband. That's not what it is. I've learned more recently. But
How recently?
a few weeks ago. Anyways, so as we talk, I'm just joking. I've known this for at least 2 years. But anyways, as we, as we hear this, though, if a woman killed her own husband, that might be a reason to not necessarily support her, right?
You know what?
But
Then she gets full welfare system in prison.
whoa, really? Is that well?
Well, I mean, if you're in prison, I don't think you're paying for it.
Don't tell Jess that. Am I right? I'm just joking. Oh man, she loves me and she's not gonna kill me. She won't be a widower. Anyways, as we go
I
into,
have so many things I want to say right now.
I know, and don't. No. But I think that it's talking about if someone has the right intentions, like here, if someone's part of your church and they've lost their husband, the church should support that person, and if they're a part of the body of Christ, we should come alongside them, support them, and help them in their time of need. But some people also might try to take advantage of the church, and that's something that I think that's what he's kind of trying to warn against, is people who try to take advantage of it, and or even us supporting them for the wrong reasons.
I think there's a couple of things going on here. I think he's warning the church. This is an issue that may have been only here that it's going on. Paul has a tendency to address abuses. We see that in a lot of his writings, that you've kind of gotten, this is what it was intended for. Now you've kind of gotten out of hand. We need to fix this. My guess is the reason he's writing this letter, it's like Bill Engvall says, the reason why you have warning labels is because some idiot did exactly what they're warning you against, And the reason why he's warning them is most likely they had a problem. We can go back to Acts chapter 2 and see how they sold everything and they had all things in common. And we find in 2 Corinthians where they're taking up this offering for the church in Jerusalem. It wasn't so they could build a bigger building. It was so they could survive. And so there was this mutual caring for one another to fund, your ability to live. So I make the understanding that they were caring for widows. He gives some parameters. They need to be at least 60, which I would believe to be a very old person. Not today, but 60 would have been very old. I mean, in my lifetime, the life expectancy has grown in the United States probably 10 years, I would think, over the last 60 years. I'm not 60 yet, but close to that. It certainly has expanded. It's starting to decline now. That's an interesting thing. That's a whole different podcast. But I would think 60 would have been an old person during this time. There would have been some cultural limitations on their ability to do commerce, is what I would say. It wasn't that they didn't work and do a big part of the commerce creating. We find Proverbs 31, describes that woman as being someone who handled business very well, but there would have been some cultural limitations. And so I believe the church obviously is trying to care for these widows, but the church can't be taken advantage of. And therein lies a real tension. We have benevolence here at the church, and we have a form for people to fill out. There's some questions that we ask, and we do our best to help as many people as we possibly can, but we also understand that we can be abused. It can be abused. It can be taken advantage of. Is there a perfect system? No, there's not a perfect system. As a matter of fact, I tell people that the only way you can avoid being taken advantage of is not to help people. That's the only way you can do it. And then you're the one that loses. Because at some point, somebody's going to take advantage of you. Somebody's going to figure a way around, the system. They're going to tell you a good story and you're going to believe it, But he's just warning them against the abuses that can happen. I've heard this mischaracterized. I think he plays on some stereotypical things that probably still are alive today. Um, right or wrong, he says, if you're a woman, get married, have children, take care of your family, so you won't be going from house to house being a gossip. I think that's a stereotypical thing. But I don't think he's trying to say women are more gossips than men. I think he's trying to tell us that idle time is dangerous. And I think that's true for men or women. If you don't have something to do with your time, you're going to find yourself into things you shouldn't be. And whatever your proclivity is to be involved in, whether it's community gossip or some addiction, you're going to find yourself there if you don't find some productive use of your time. And he even he acknowledges there's this tension when you're young. I don't find it uncommon. There's a couple of things that these are kind of stereotypical that I observe. It's not uncommon for older women to become widows, never to remarry. But it's very uncommon for older men not to remarry. And I would say there's multiple reasons for that. When it comes to the domestication of life, there are things it's not that I couldn't do them, I would just be lost because I depend on my wife for so many things. And the same may be true for her. I don't know. Certainly not domestically, I would say that. But I think women, he doesn't talk about widowers, the murdering widowers or the
or the men.
the male widowers, either one. Because I think men they probably had multiple wives in this context. They probably did. It's a high probability, but they're more likely to remarry. There's this tension, should we remarry? Because he addresses it. He says, younger widows, their physical desires are going to overtake them. So there's going to be this desire to either want to bear children or to want the companionship of someone else. And he said, they should remarry. He later says that they should remarry because there is value in companionship. Marriage is an honorable institution from the Lord, and so I don't think it's a cut and dry. Okay, if you're over 60, you qualify. If you're under 60, you don't qualify. In our context, so as we're recording this, we're in December. I think this will be a January podcast that people listen to, but we're in December as we're recording this. We're in November, aren't we? I don't know.
We are in November.
We're almost to December. But we our church sends a check and a card every year to widows and widowers, by the way, the ones alone and the ones who murdered. Zack, you have created a whole new definition for me.
Oh, goodness.
But we send a check to them every year at Christmas time, to honor them.
This will be our first full week of January.
Okay. And so we're confused. If you wonder why we sound confused sometimes, because
Merry Christmas,
I think
everyone.
today is first week of January and I'm wearing Christmas socks.
I know you're talking about preachers with sneakers, but I'm always just get caught by whatever socks you have on, like egg socks or I don't know. I think that was the last.
That probably was that you were on. I had on egg socks. What is on yours, Zach?
I got my Bigfoot socks today, so
it's my
Bigfoot. Hairy guy. We have a lot in common.
Please no, we're not going there.
We're not going there.
Don't derail this podcast.
All right. Well,
your warm blanket male prostitution scene.
Oh my gosh! If they don't know, they don't know what
you said it on a podcast.
Yeah, but what if someone's new joining for the first time today? By the way, welcome
go back
to the
and
podcast.
listen. That's what you should do.
To all 500 other podcasts to find out this one reference.
Oh me. So I don't think it's as cut and dried as we might want to think it is. I think the church constantly has to weigh in on this tension. How do we help people and be good stewards? some people use no stewardship and they help whoever. Other people use stewardship as a reason to help no one, And it's a tension that I think we constantly have to manage. I don't think it can be resolved. I don't think we'll come up with a list ever that gets all the right people on and excludes all the wrong people. We just have to constantly be working at it and try to do what God's called.
Do you think that the problem that he's addressing here was that they were helping out whatever widow came and said, I need money, or that they weren't helping? Do we know that?
Say that again?
Was the problem he obviously there's some problem here that reason why he's addressing this in such great detail. Do you think it was that they were being overly generous and helping out whoever, like, oh, you're a widow and you're 20 years old, we'll give you, that it was they weren't helping out the people that needed it?
My observation based on the way it's written would be that he was more concerned about enablement than he was stinginess. That's what I think. And I would say that based on his other writings, that these things get out of hand. They started out as a well-meaning thing. Communion would have been an easy one that he addressed. It started out as a well-meaning thing, and it just got out of hand. And that's what I would guess was going on, that they were a generous church trying to do what was right, and people were going, oh, I'm a widow. I'm going to be a widower and kill my husband.
I will say that there are times where, especially in years past, where like Wendy was gone and I was kind of the one in the office, and I all of a sudden was dealing with a whole bunch of these requests, and it is difficult to decide. And I wasn't even the one making the decision by any means, but to talk to these people and tell them, oh, you have to come fill out a form and there's a process and all of this, and explain it. But like you said, if we were just handing out money to whoever, it just doesn't work. It's not practical.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, it is rare if someone goes through our process that they are told no. And that's part of the reason for the process, is because if you don't have enough initiative to say, okay, I'm going to do this now, there are some extreme cases. I can't get to the church. I don't have transportation. I am completely broke and can't put gas in my car. There would be some extreme situations. But if they go through the process, we do our best to try to help them or find the resources for them. Because it is a tension, we are giving God's money to steward, our own personal money as well, because when we help individuals, we have to be aware of the situation. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us next week as we begin a conversation around the book of 2 Timothy.